everyone. Welcome, everybody. Welcome and thank you for coming. And the presentation slides will be located at this link that we'll post. And so there's lots of good links within the presentation itself. So thank you all for coming. My name is Ethan Bull, and I'm a pre-health professions advisor in the A Center. And so this is a presentation about how to prepare for the MCAT. I'm here with our awesome team of other advisors, including Josephine Jin Morgan, who's our director, Lauren Mosley and Neti Gupta, who are both pre-health advisors. And then we've got one of our panelists with us already today. Thank you for coming, Troy. It's great to see you. And so I'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. And this will be recorded and we'll post it on our website relatively soon. So let me share my screen. Okay. So, great. Okay, so yeah, again, you can see the link to find the presentation here. First thing I wanted to do was the land acknowledgement. So we respectfully acknowledge the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being the home of the O'odham and Yaqui. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. And then I did want to just get a general sense of kind of who's in the room with us today. So if you don't mind popping in the chat, just your year in school and what major you're in, just out of curiosity. Go ahead and put your name or your year and your major in the chat if you don't mind. Oh, cool. So we've got some juniors, sophomores, seniors, lots of different majors, mostly science majors. Great. Awesome. Well, welcome and thank you for coming. Okay. So our objectives today are going to be as follows. I'm going to give a kind of like a brief overview of the MCAT, details about the basics, length of the MCAT, sections and content, when you might want to take it, some details about how to prepare, when to register and costs, and then we'll have a student panel. You can definitely ask questions in the chat, but we likely won't get to questions until the end. Although some of my colleagues may be able to answer in the chat. So, just a clarification, right? So we're going to discuss how to prepare for the MCAT, but I'm not going to review individual commercial products or which ones we think you should purchase or spend time on. It's just, this presentation is more designed to kind of give you an overview of how the MCAT works, things that you might want to think about as you're choosing and researching your MCAT prep tools, and a brief tour of some of the official AAMC resources. So we find that students do best when they reflect carefully on how they learn and what works best for them, and do their own research into what products are going to work. So what is the MCAT? So big view is it's the medical college admissions test, or the MCAT. It's a standardized multiple choice exam. It's going to assess problem solving, critical thinking, and then your knowledge of natural, behavioral, and social science concepts and principles. And you may wonder why medical schools still use it. Research from the AAMC suggests that there is some sort of correlation between MCAT scores and success in medical school, as well as success on the USMLE board exams. And so it's kind of that predictive validity that they're looking at. And they also suggest that together with GPA, MCAT scores can signal likely success in medical school and on-time graduation from medical school. And so that's why they still use it. They think it does predict some important things. I think I just got muted, right? Now I'm unmuted. So how important is your MCAT score? I mean, it's important, right? But you are more than your MCAT score. So remember that. That said, a higher score on the MCAT can make it easier to get into the medical school you're most interested in, or a medical school in general. And some schools do have a minimum score. So it is important that you're able to demonstrate your mastery of these skills on this test. There is a link in the presentation that you might want to take a look at. It's a grid that shows MCAT score versus GPA and what percentage of students get in at different levels. And so that can be useful to take a look at as well. And what do you need to know? The basics. So basically, how many times can you take it? In 1 year, you can take it up to 3 times. In 2 years, you can take it up to 4 times. And then in your lifetime, you can take it up to a maximum of 7 times. Voids and no-shows count as attempts. So when you take the MCAT test, if you do not like how you performed, and before seeing your score, when you're sitting there in the test, you can void it, but that counts as one of your 7 lifetime attempts, as well as the attempts per year. And then if you sign up for one and then you don't show up, that also counts, even though that's not shared with schools. Schools do see your score for every attempt that you have. And then other things to know, there's no points deducted for guessing. The national average for matriculants in this most recent cycle was about 511, 512, kind of a little bit closer to 512, so I rounded it up. The national average, and that's for matriculants, right? So students that actually started medical school. And the national average for applicants last year was right around 506. There is a must-read document, the MCAT Essentials. And so you will 100% want to read that. The link to the most recent one is in the presentation, but it's kind of got all those nitty-gritty details about like what kind of ID you need and what you can look at and where to put your phone and the things that you have to sign. So you'll definitely want to do that, read that portion of it for sure. And then how long is the test and what's on it? So your exam day for this year, there's one start time, which is at 8 a.m. There's a few dates a little bit later in the cycle, kind of towards the end of summer, that have one other start date. But for the most part, there's going to be one start time, and that's going to be 8 a.m. The test is 7.5 hours long. And so you can kind of see the schedule here. There's a few certifications and tutorials to do. And then you've got the first section, which is the chemical and physical foundations. You've got just over an hour and a half to complete that one. Then you've got a break, and that break is optional. If you can choose to take it. If you don't choose to take it, you don't gain time on the next section, you just start the next section. And so the next section is the CARS section, critical analysis and reasoning skills, which is about an hour and a half. Then you have a longer break in the middle. Again, it's optional. You've got the biological and biochemical foundations of living systems after that, another optional 10-minute break, and then the psychological, social, and biological foundations after that. And then you'll have 3 minutes after you finish the test to void it. So if you're feeling like you did way worse than you think you can do, and just whatever happened on that day, you know that this isn't a test that you want to keep, you've got 3 minutes to decide. And if you choose to void it, schools will not see that score, but that does, again, it does count towards the total number of times you can take it in a year, 2 years, and in a lifetime. And then they have a survey. And so the content is about 6 hours and 15 minutes, but the seat time is about 7.5 hours. The 4 sections, you can kind of see an overview here. The first section, the chemical and physical foundations of biological systems, has 59 questions. It's got 10 passages. So these are passages that might have graphs or data or text. And then 44 questions based on those, and then 15 questions that stand alone. And each section is scored on the 118 to 132 scale. And then the CAR section, it's all passages. So it's 53 questions on 9 passages, no standalone question. biological and biochemical foundations of living systems. Again, there's 59 questions, 10 passages, about 4 questions on average per passage, and then 15 standalones. And then the last section has that same structure where about 4 questions per passage, and then 15 standalones. So that's kind of like the overall structure. We're talking about the subjects that are tested. In the chemical and physical foundations of living systems section, you can see it's about a quarter physics, a quarter biochem, and then just over a quarter general chemistry, and then some organic chemistry and intro biology. They do expect you to be able to synthesize all of this information, and so they're not asking individual questions on each type of science. They're going to ask you to combine all of that knowledge together to answer those questions. The other scientific section, the biological and biochemical foundations of living systems section, it's about 65% intro bio, about a quarter biochemistry, and then 5% each general and organic chemistry. That's kind of the balance of the sciences that are included in the test. And so you can see those science sections broken out here, as well as the CAR section, which is basically reading comprehension, right? They're looking at your reasoning within the text and your reasoning beyond the text. So drawing inferences, understanding the text, comprehending complex texts. And then the psychosocial, social, and biological foundations of behavior section is 65% psychology, 30% sociology, and 5% biology. And so you can kind of see that biology is the most tested science subject on the MCAT. The CAR section being its own subject is kind of the biggest on its own subject, reading comprehension. But again, all this is kind of synthesis in each of these areas. And so it's important that you have a broad understanding of each area so you can synthesize that knowledge in answering the questions. So when should you take it? We recommend taking the test once you have completed all of the core prerequisite courses. And so we'll go over those in a little bit, but we recommend that you've taken all the MCAT courses, all those subjects that are being tested before you take it. We don't recommend self-studying. Instead, we recommend taking the courses. You'll want to take it the spring semester of the year that you actually apply to medical school, or sometimes the summer before. That's a common way to do it, especially if you're applying in your senior year and taking one gap year. Ultimately, you want to take it when you're prepared. Most students study for about 3 to 6 months, in that range, so they can be as successful as possible on the test. The classes that you need before the MCAT, the AAMC recommends a year of chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, and biology, and then a semester of psychology, sociology, and biochemistry. The truth is that most additional sciences like biology and biochemistry that you would take before the MCAT can only help, right? The more you know, the better. And for example, our office, we usually recommend trying to get in a semester of physiology, which is a type of biology. Before the MCAT, we find that our students think that that's pretty useful. And then, many U of A students take a psychology course, but choose to self-study the sociology stuff. But of course, you can also take a sociology course. When is the MCAT offered? It is offered every year between January and February, or January and September, sorry. So 9 months of the year, except for February. So they skip February. The explanation they gave in their most recent workshop was that there is not demand for February dates, and their research shows that students don't need those February dates, and so that's why they do it. So that's their explanation. We usually recommend taking the MCAT between January and April of your application year, so that you've got your score before you would want to submit the application in late May or early June. And so, that's kind of a general framework, but everyone's timeline's unique. There's no one right way to do it. And so, these are general guidelines and recommendations, not the one right way to do it. 2022 MCAT dates are now available on the AAMC MCAT website. And so there's some good links for their registration page and their getting ready page. For the Western region, October 14th, it's coming up pretty soon. And that is the key date for all the Western region, including Arizona. So if you want to take the test here, you definitely want to go through the getting ready page and follow their steps. And so that's going to mean that you're filling in the first 5 tabs. So all those key details, dates really do go fast. So you want to be there when the system opens. The system officially opens at 9 a.m. Arizona time, but they start the line at 8:50 a.m. Arizona time. And so make sure that you're logged in before 8:50 a.m. Arizona time, because right at 8:50 a.m., then they're going to randomly assign everyone that's logged in to a spot in line. And then if you log in at 8:51, you're automatically at the back of the line. And so in order to get your dates, I recommend making sure you're logged in before 8:50 a.m. I might, check the system, your system at 7 a.m. Try logging in at 8:15 or 8:30 so that you're on there at 8:50. Maybe check the night before as well. But know that if you're on at 6 a.m., you don't get to register sooner than anyone else. Anyone that's logged in at 8:59 will be assigned a random spot in for the test. And then how do you prepare? So this is just, again, there's no one right way to do it. This is just kind of a general graphic overview of what we recommend. So we recommend starting with a full-length diagnostic exam or practice exam. The AAMC offers one free diagnostic exam. It doesn't give you a score report, like an actual numerical score, but it does give you a report of which areas you need to work on. So then you look at the results of your diagnostic test, and that helps you create a study plan, like which subjects do you need to really focus in on your content review, which sections are you stronger in, and so maybe you need a little bit less time. So you create that study plan, and then we recommend the first portion of your study period you spend on content reviews. So that means reviewing intro biology, intro physics, all those different pieces of the puzzle. And then you start incorporating practice questions and doing practice tests. And as you do those practice tests and those practice questions, you'll reassess your study plan, see areas where you still need work, do more content review. And then as you approach your MCAT date, you should be taking full-length practice tests, often the AAMC full-length practice tests that will give you a score report. And so you'll have a pretty good sense of how you'll do. Most times those tests are a pretty good predictor of what score you're going to get on the actual test on the actual day. And so our recommendation is if you're doing well on those practice tests, you're scoring where your target score is. If you're scoring where your target score is, then go for it, right? If you're not scoring where your target score is, I might recommend kind of going back to the drawing board and reassessing. It's very rare from our experience that you're scoring a little bit lower on the practice test and suddenly in the real deal, you score much higher than that. Most of the time you're scoring generally right around those practice test scores. And so don't be afraid to take the courageous step of reassessing if you just aren't quite ready. And Troy made a really cool point that there's the AAMC free diagnostic test. There are systems online that can help give you a rough estimate of your score based on that. Awesome. Thank you for that, Troy. And then, so again, just kind of general brush strokes, how to prepare, plan to study for about 3 to 6 months. It's pretty typical for preparation time, but again, there's no one size fits all formula. Definitely take a diagnostic. Definitely create a study plan that's super detailed, like literally from 6 to 8 p.m. on Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm going to be studying biology and biochemistry, right? And then, in this month, I'm going to be doing this, and this month, I'm going to be doing that, right? It's a really detailed study plan. And there are some good links in here. The AAMC has some good study plan creation tools. And then, there's plenty of great study plan creation tools from commercial products as well. And so those from our experience, have been pretty good tools as well. Make sure you're assessing your test taking. So be sure to determine kind of how you perform best, and that'll help you figure out what resources you may want to use, right? So you might be a person that needs to take a course and you need to have an instructor, right? And so, if that's the case, you might take the think tank course from the U of A that is relatively reasonably priced, or from a different product or a different commercial service that you look up. You might self-study from books. You might take a self-guided course from one of those commercial companies. You might use the Khan Academy collection, which is free. So there's all sorts of different ways of doing things, but make sure you're being realistic and thinking about the way you learn and the way you take tests and study the best in choosing those. So then you're gathering resources, buying or preparing what you've decided on. And then we definitely recommend that you avoid common errors that people make. And so common errors that people make, so taking the MCAT before you've taken all the coursework, that can often be tricky. Trying to learn all the material like you might for a final exam, you don't need to know it in quite the same way that you would need to for a final exam. Taking the test even though you don't feel ready, we don't recommend that. Not building enough time into your schedule to really be able to tackle the energy that it takes to prepare for the exam. We find it can often be hard to balance schoolwork, work, family, any other obligations you have with MCAT studying. And so just being really realistic and building a plan. Instead of self-assessing, just doing what other people have said works. So definitely make sure you think about how you work and what works best for you as you're developing your plans. And so yeah, avoiding those kinds of mistakes that we've seen students make. This is a giant page of resources. And so again, the link is in the chat for this presentation. So you'll have access to all these links. Definitely take advantage of the fee assistance program. If you are eligible for Pell Grants, or even if you aren't, they've expanded the criteria for who can get the, access to the fee assistance program. They give you a ton of free MCAT prep resources, and you can use it for up to 2 years when you apply, and then you can apply for it multiple times. So, definitely take advantage of that if you're eligible. See if you're eligible. There are planning tools from the AAMC that I linked to before, including an online and a PDF option. And then there's a bunch of other resources. So the AAMC has those official practice exams and question packs. There are that free sample test, links to the Khan Academy MCAT collection. There are roadmaps to the cars section in the Khan Academy. So which videos are going to touch on those skills that'll be important in cars, sample guides. I think they have some really nice student stories and tips from students on the AAMC website, where students kind of talk about like, here's what I did, here's how I prepared, here's my story. I think that can be helpful as well. And then they are improving the AAMC sample test this month. And so it's worth taking a look at the way that they've improved it. Some of our students do take the U of A Think Tank MCAT prep course. I think it's about $1,000, don't quote me, for U of A students and alumni. And so that's something to look at. But again, think about what works best for you and definitely do your research. We've had tons of students just have great luck with private test prep companies and materials. So don't be afraid to really do your research, dig into what's out there and what's going to work best for you. Some of those commercial companies give you some free resources just to kind of try to rope you in to buying their products, but those free resources can be really great as well. And then the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in the Health Sciences here at U of A, they've got some resources that you may be able to access. So check out that link. And I do recommend really kind of spending some time researching, exploring, making sure you've got enough time to really find what's going to work best for you. The AAMC has this graphic for their product, right? You can kind of see, here's what they recommend for their planning tools, and then the practice tools that are available from them. And the AAMC is the Association of American Medical Colleges. They run the MCAT and the AMCAT application. And then there is a student webinar that just happened on September 30th, and they just released the recording. So I definitely recommend watching that too. It's kind of like the MCAT Essentials Guide for 2022. It's got some nitty-gritty details that are just really going to be useful for you to know so that you don't face any surprises. And then know that you can use accommodations on the MCAT. About 1.5% of the students that take the MCAT use accommodations. So if you use accommodations here at U of A, definitely check that out. It can be kind of a cumbersome process. And so definitely start early. And there's even, if you're eligible for fee assistance, they may be able to help you with updated evaluations for accommodations that you need to give to them. It can take up to 60 days to process those accommodation requests. And so definitely take a look at that stuff. And some of the common accommodations that people get: extra time, extra breaks, or testing in a separate room. So definitely take advantage of that. So in terms of registration and cost, so again, I would recommend going to that registration page and really walking through those details. October 14th is going to be the date. And this year it's going to include all the dates between January and June. That the MCAT dates that are available between January and June. On October 14th, you can sign up for any space within there. The cost is $325. And they have reinstituted rescheduling and cancellation fees this year. And so those rescheduling fees can range from $50 to $200, depending on when you do it. And then cancellation, as long as you do it before 30 days, you get a portion of your money back. If you are eligible for fee assistance and you apply for it and get it, the cost for the MCAT is $130. So it's much cheaper, but it's not retroactive. So you can't sign up, pay $325, and then do fee assistance and get it back. You need to do fee assistance first. Fee assistance also gives you, can be up to over $2,000 of other resources around MCAT prep, but also application processes, MSAR, and stuff like that. So what advice do students give that have taken the MCAT? And so I'm going to skip through this part really quickly so we can get to our student panel. But there is a questionnaire that they give to students in the MCAT every year, and the results can give some interesting information. I don't think, that you have to, draw too many causal conclusions based on the stuff that's in this survey, but it can give you some ideas about what other students are doing and some ideas for approaches that you might take. So for instance, this page includes, this is just what courses have you taken before you took the MCAT. So it's not like I took these and these helped me with the MCAT. It's which ones have you taken? And so you can kind of see that over 90% of the students have taken, that big chunk of common science courses that the AAMC recommends. And then, it kind of goes down further from there. They also ask what tools people used and what was useful to them. And so you can kind of see the official MCAT practice tests. Most students used them, and most students thought they were really helpful, right? And then there's all sorts of other things on there. And it certainly, but it may give you some ideas. They ask about how students prepared for exam day itself. Again, there's no causal link here, right? This is just what students did, right? So taking a timed online practice exam that mimics the conditions of exam day, right? In an uncomfortable foreign place that is not your house, right? So 90% of the students did that. Lots of students practice pacing themselves, got plenty of sleep, all those other pieces of the puzzle. And then challenges that students faced. Seems like the #1 challenge was staying confident. feeling confident they could do well on the exam. And so it really is that paying attention to the emotional side of the preparation process is important as well. So making sure you have that positive self-talk, you stay positive in, what's in your control, and, keep your confidence up. Awesome. Are my panelists here? I know Troy is here, right? And
I'm here too.
And Amanda's here as well. Thank you so much for joining us. So we've got two students here with us who have recently taken the MCAT. And these are our two students, Troy Weinstein and Amanda Gong. And both are in the HEAP program, the Honors Early Assurance program. And so I'm going to ask them to just share a little bit of information about how they handled the MCAT and what their MCAT story is. Do you each want to introduce yourselves really briefly? Maybe starting with Troy, do you want to tell us, kind of what your major is, what year you are in school, anything else you think might be useful?
Sounds good. Yeah. So thank you, Ethan. First off, I mean, that was a great presentation, and props to everyone who is here, because that was incredible. And I really wish I had come to this before I started my MCAT story, per se. So like Ethan said, my name is Troy Weinstein. I'm currently a senior studying physiology and medical sciences with a minor in Spanish and biochemistry. Let's see, some campus involvements. I'm a campus ambassador, give the walking tours around campus. You might see me singing the Bear Down song. I'm an EMT for UAEMS. I'm involved in the Physiology Honors Academy. I'm in the Bobcat Senior Honorary. And yes, I recently got accepted to the Honors Early Assurance program. So thanks for having us here. Amanda?
Hi guys, my name is Amanda. I am a current biochemistry senior. I was accepted into the Honors Early Assurance program. And I guess a few things about what I'm involved with. I was and still kind of am, heavily involved with research. So neurophysiology and oncology, really. And I also spent a lot of time involved with the pre-health honorary AED. And I was an ED scribe for a while too.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So got a few questions for you. And so the first one is just if you could share your MCAT journey with us, just kind of some basics on like, how did you prepare? Why did you decide to prepare that way? Did it work for you? Did you end up taking the test more than once? Right, those kinds of things. Do you want to start again, Troy? Is that okay?
Yes, sounds good to me. So yeah, my MCAT journey, it's been quite a journey, I will say, but it's been a good journey, honestly. And I think many of you here, if you put in the time and effort, you will end up on the other side as well. But just to give you some context, so I did end up taking the MCAT twice. So I studied hard for about 2.5 months, was doing well in practice tests and whatnot, and felt like I was well prepared. And for whatever reason, the test just didn't go well. My first one, I got like 500. So not great. And I was pretty disappointed. It was a lot lower than my practice tests. So after that, I was like, I'm still going to take it again. Like, I think kind of just chalked it up as a bad day, did some introspective thinking and was really like, okay, like, what can I improve? Like, where did I kind of go wrong? I think in that process, I kind of learned a lot about myself, about my study habits. And yeah, I ended up taking it about a month and a half later and did much, much better, and things kind of ended up working out. So I guess kind of like my MCAT journey. So yeah, I ended up taking it twice, right? So what did I really learn though between, I guess, kind of not failing it, but not doing great on the first one and the second one? And everyone is different, right? So like, I could sit here and tell you exactly how I studied, and that might work for 10 of you in here, but it's definitely not going to work for everyone. So as far as studying for the MCAT, right, Ethan kind of hit it right on the nail. You need to that outline. You really need to get the content down, and then you need to do a lot of practice problems and practice tests and whatnot, right? The content, if you just have to learn that essentially. And I mean, I'll tell you how I learned it, but it's really up to you to learn that content. There's so many different ways to do it. And I think the first time I studied for the test, I took the advice of a lot of people and kind of started reading the books and reading through the books, but just didn't really end up soaking up that content. Never really learned it that well for that first test. And I think that's kind of what got me. There were a lot of passages on the sections that I wasn't really confident on because I hadn't really nailed those sections home. So the second time I was like, you know what, like I do well in class, like I have a good GPA and whatnot. So I was like, I'm going to study like this. Here's the content. I got to learn it. I've learned a lot of stuff in class, so I'm going to do a similar method. So, I mean, my learning method is I like watching videos. I like watching Khan Academy. I take notes. I go through my notes. So that's what I did. So I went through all the Khan Academy videos, kind of sped them up. Thought those were fantastic for me, at least. Took notes on them like I would for a normal test. Went through, highlighted my notes, memorized the notes essentially, and that's how I learned the content. And I felt like I had the content like the back of my hand, and that gave me a lot more confidence walking into the test. I was like, I know this stuff, like I learned this stuff. But yeah, however, whatever works best for you. If you are more visual learners or auditory, maybe, yeah, go through Khan Academy. But if you do prefer reading textbooks and going that route, yeah, do the Kaplan or what's the other kind? Yeah, Kaplan or Princeton Review, right? But yeah, so that's kind of the first part, and definitely take a practice test before, because you'll see it's a beast of a test, and it's a really unique test as well. They're not asking you specific questions. Although there are some specific questions, they're not going to say like, what is X or what is Y? It's a combination of a lot of different testing strategies. And so taking that practice test before really kind of helped me be like, okay, like this is what I should be expecting. This is the depth of knowledge that I really need to know, because you don't need to know every single piece of content out of those books or in Khan Academy. But taking that practice test kind of gives you a baseline. Like, okay, this is how well I need to know this content. And then, right, the next part is really understanding the test, because you could know all the content and still not do well on the test, which is kind of a little bit intimidating. But that's where the second part of studying comes in. And you can kind of mix those as well. But you really just need to do a lot of practice problems, whether that be through UWorld or through the AAMC. Or through Jack Weston. There's a ton of great resources to do practice problems. You just really need to put in the time, do those practice problems, and then you start seeing how they ask questions. You start kind of building your own strategy as far as how you answer those questions. You see patterns, and you're able to, as you're reading the passage, it takes a while, but as you're reading the passage, you're like, I know they're going to ask me a question about this. And you already know the answer to a question they haven't even asked. And so doing a lot of practice problems, a lot of practice tests really sets you up well for that. So I don't want to go too long here, but kind of the last thing I want to say is, right, it's a beast of a test, and you really do have to put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, make some sacrifices, but don't let it like really take over your life. Because I think that kind of happened to me the first time. I was like, had such a set in stone schedule, which is great. Like a schedule is great. But I think I kind of gave myself, I guess I didn't give myself enough time to really still go, like, I mean, I was fine. Like I was enjoying life and whatnot, but like set aside time to do what you enjoy. Go spend time with family, go enjoy the outdoors, go socialize, go out here and there if that's what you enjoy doing. Like still find time to do that, because I mean, if you're trying to go to medical school, like I hate to break it to you, we're going to have a lot more tests. And so I think I really learned this the second time through. I was like, I'm not going to let this like take over my life. I mean, it's just a test. It's a big test, but it's a test. You can take it twice. Like I took it twice and it worked out just fine. So it's not the end of the world if it doesn't go well. Still live your life, but definitely work hard, put in a lot of time, put in a lot of effort, and really kind of not, if need be, rely on that social network that you all have, because I mean, we're all here for you. I know Amanda and I will be the department that's here as well, the advising department, your family, your friends, rely on them as well. It's a great chance for them to kind of support you, and I'm sure they will. So that's kind of my spiel journey. I'll put my email in the chat. But feel free to reach out whenever and ask questions as well after Amanda goes. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Amanda. What about your MCAT journey?
All right, so this is a story for all you procrastinators out there. So I had a very planned out schedule, and I actually wanted to take my MCAT in like August or September of my junior year. And I had already mapped everything out, and I'm sure all you type A people also relate. And then COVID happened, and my life became very, very different, and a lot of personal issues arose in my life. And so I ended up pushing my MCAT back to like midway through my junior year. But I, at that point, like had not stuck to a study schedule. That was very hard for me to learn how to adjust also. And like Troy said, there's a lot of, life goes on. There's a lot of tests that we take. So I did only take it once, but I didn't spend as much time studying for it as I wanted to. So over that time period where I had pushed my MCAT back, I was kind of intermittently studying, but kind of procrastinating a little bit. I think it was hard too, because I was working a job as a scribe. It was really hard to fit in. And so I probably spent a solid month and a half really buckling down and just cramming. So it's not a great strategy, and I probably don't recommend it for most. But again, if life happens and, there's other personal issues that rise up, like don't be hard on yourself, especially type A pre-meds. I know we all tend to be very hard on ourselves. But yeah, I would recommend at the very least signing up maybe for the Jack Weston passages, or like the daily Kaplan, or even Shemasian. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but I'll put those all in the chat. But I would recommend signing up for those. So even on your worst day, or even when there's a lot going on in life, you can still feel good about doing one CARS passage and maybe a couple of questions a day. And so it's very similar to what Troy was saying. I think a lot of the practice is important. Of course, like knowing the content too, but just kind of understanding the structure, I think, can help with a lot of fatigue in the exam, because it is a very different, hard exam. And so, yeah, I would recommend not procrastinating, but also not freaking out if life gets in the way. And remembering that being a physician and going to medical school is a lot more about being well-rounded, and a lot more about growing from your experiences, and understanding what hardship means. And if this is something that ends up changing you as a person, or impacting your life in some way, don't be afraid of that. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So I've got a few follow-up questions. Let's see. Either of you, what do you wish you knew about the MCAT before you took it? Is there anything that you all can think of? And either of you, whoever wants to go first, can go.
I think I wish I knew how hard it was, because I think I might have underestimated it a little bit. So I was like, oh, I'm like a good student. I do well on tests. Never really had a problem studying for big tests. And I think I did underestimate it a little bit. And I never really ended up taking one of those practice tests until kind of a good amount into my studying. So I really wish I had taken at least a half length or a full length before studying, because once I took that, I was like, whoa, like this is a big test. But also just, I guess, kind of knowing that, I don't know, just trust the process. Like everyone's different. Everyone's going to have their own study plan. Make a study plan and stick with it. Like don't question yourself too much. I mean, you can definitely reevaluate, but if you make a plan, put some thought into it, and stick with it, and just trust the process.
Awesome, thank you. What about you, Amanda? Is there anything you wish you knew before you took the MCAT?
I think I wish I knew more about my strengths and weaknesses. So for instance, as a biochemistry major, the biochem section, I learned a lot of it in my classes. I felt maybe a bit more prepared for the physics section because that's also a bit in like the biochemistry mindset. But for instance, like I didn't know enough about the way the heart works or the kidney works because I'm not a physiology major. So I think I wish I had paid more attention so I could have strategically studied, especially given the short amount of time that I had, in terms of really focusing in on the material that I didn't know.
Awesome. Thank you. And I suppose I think we got some advice from both of you. Is there anything that either of you didn't mention that you think would be useful advice for students planning to take the MCAT pretty soon?
I would say like have confidence in yourself, because a big part of it is it's a big long test, and they kind of feel like part of the test is almost to like test your like emotional like fortitude and like how well you can focus in a test, and like there's no need, it really has to be this long of a test. But I think that's kind of the purpose of it. It's a long test. So I mean, if you have studied like a good amount of time and done decently well on your practice tests and whatnot, like walk in there with some confidence. Like you deserve it. Like you put the time and effort in. There's no reason you shouldn't be like intimidated by the test. I mean, if you put that time and effort in, it's like you should feel confident and ready to go. And just trust that the studying is going to pay off. And I'll say that it will. And good luck if you are taking it soon.
I think I would have approached it a little differently in terms of not making it a chore. Yeah, there's some discipline that is required to study and say, okay, I'm going to spend 1 hour, 2 hours on this day studying for the exam. But I think if I had more of a mindset of, oh, this is going to help me in my future career, and this is something that is useful and impactful to me, I wouldn't have procrastinated it as much as I did. Again, give yourself grace. If life happens, it's okay. But I think remembering that this material is the material that you're going to have to study for medical school, and this is what you want to do with your life. I think remembering the end goal rather than looking at the 2 hours that you have to spend where you could be doing other things is really helpful in remembering that dream.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think you both talked a little bit about what you would do differently. So I think we've already addressed that question. And so I did want to give us a chance to, are you, Troy and Amanda, are you okay to stick around for a few minutes if people had a couple questions?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So if anyone has any questions for our two students who recently took the MCAT that have generously offered to give us their time. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask? You can unmute yourself and ask, or you can ask a question in the chat.
Hi, I had a question a little bit less geared towards the MCAT and more about what your clinical experience was for the HEAP program. I feel like I've had a really hard time trying to find clinical experience in volunteering roles with COVID. So I was wondering what your experience was with that and what you did.
Yeah, I can go for that. So I kind of did like the EMT route. So I'm not sure exactly what year you are, but it takes about a semester. You take a semester long class. They offer it through U of A. And you get your EMT certification. And then I applied to UAEMS, where I responded to 911 calls for the campus, became a supervisor. So that's kind of where I got the bulk of my clinical experience, and I have absolutely loved it. Like you really get to be the one responsible and making decisions and like giving medical care. And so yeah, that's kind of the route I went down.
So my journey is a tiny bit different. I spent time shadowing pre-COVID, and then obviously once COVID hit, that ended up cutting off any opportunities for clinical experience. So I know how challenging and frustrating that is. And then I ended up picking one of the only options that was left because I didn't have enough time to go and do an EMT certification. And I ended up scribing, and that for me was a really valuable experience. I think learning how to work long hours because I was in the emergency department, and then also understanding the stress that COVID had and seeing physician burnout. And I think just understanding all the complications that arise in medicine were really useful to me. And I think I use some of my experiences while interviewing of what it means to be a good physician and what it means to be a compassionate and caring physician. And so that was mainly where I got a lot of my clinical experience once shadowing wasn't an option anymore.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We do have a question in the chat. And the question is, how do you work on study life balance and time management in terms of having a job, double minors, and all the other stuff that you do? How are you able to find that balance with the MCAT studying?
So what I would say is, I don't know what position you are when you're taking the MCAT, but if possible, I would really try to kind of limit stuff, just stuff in general when you're studying for the MCAT. Because I mean, we're all busy. We have so many commitments, and you know how the pre-health life is. But when you're planning out maybe your 4-year plan or something, and if you have this luxury at least, and really looking at, okay, when am I going to take the MCAT, and can I maybe make this a little bit of a lighter semester? Can I maybe take 1 or 2 less classes, take a few less units, or become slightly less involved in a club here and there? Kind of really allowed me to set time aside for the MCAT. And because the MCAT, I mean, it's not what gets you into med school. There's a lot more, but it can definitely like block you from getting in, if that makes sense. Like it's like something that you kind of like, I guess, need, but it's not the end all say all. So it's like you really want to make it a priority, if possible. And I don't know, just really kind of scheduling stuff out as far as time management goes, scheduling out your week, really kind of focusing, like preventing distractions. That's what helped me a lot.
That's a very good question. I think that's extremely hard because, you know, I think it's the joke, right? You get either sleep, a social life, or good grades. And I think you can pick 2 out of 3. So yes, I do definitely think it's complicated. But especially like some of the advice I've gotten from current medical students, I think I wish I had known while studying for my MCAT, but I think it's important to set boundaries and just start setting boundaries now. Prioritize what's meaningful to you in terms of your extracurriculars. So I, for instance, stuck with a not-for-profit that I'm a part of that focuses on education because I know that's super important to me. But I took some time back from a pre-health honorary that I'm a part of because I didn't have the time to commit. So I think making sure that you know where your priorities are is really important. And yes, I think a couple of tips is just setting boundaries. So I think especially in that time where I was cramming, but just in general, trying to only schedule hanging out with people on the weekends, for instance, like even though you have the freedom to hang out on the weekdays, make a point to spend that time studying. Another really good thing is Google Calendar, just like block off the time. Like you can't schedule anything. It has to be that time for studying. And also, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Pomodoro technique, but you basically do like a half hour of work and like 5 minutes of a break or something like that. You could do 50 minutes of work in a 10-hour break. But I think that also helps in terms of like finding a good balance, because I think part of that is also like your mental health, you know. And so I think sitting down and trying to study for 7 hours straight isn't healthy, but going out and hanging out instead of studying isn't great either. So, you know, give yourself little breaks, but not crazy big breaks if you need to spend that time studying.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank my 2 panelists today, Troy and Amanda. Again, thank you so much for generously donating your time to help other students, you know, on this journey. And so I really appreciate it. And I think the advice that you gave and the experiences that you shared were amazing and are really going to help our students know that there's no one right way to do it. And knowing yourself is kind of a big part of figuring out the MCAT, as well as, you know, getting to medical school in general. And so that concludes kind of the bulk of our presentation tonight. And, you know, there's some of the sources. Again, that link to the PowerPoint is already in the chat. You know, but I did want to, we do have a few minutes left, right? So it's, you know, it's kind of 4:58-ish. And so our panelists, thank you so much for coming. You're very welcome to run. I'm going to stick around. If anyone has any questions, I'll stick around for as long as people have questions. So if you've got questions, you can unmute yourself and ask our team about the MCAT, or put your questions in the chat. So thank you all for coming, and I totally understand if you've got to run.
I'll be heading out, but email me. I'm always open to even just grab coffee if you guys have questions and just want a friend who's gonna guide you through stuff. So bye, guys.
Same goes.
Thank you, Amanda.
Reach out, but thanks for everyone for coming.
Thank you, Troy. Cool. So does anyone have any questions? We pre-health advisors are here to support you.
They're all going bye-bye.
It's been a long day. It's Wednesday.
I know.
Right?
Very nicely done. Good job, Ethan.
Thank you.
I think they're all leaving except for maybe some of our ambassadors. Are they still here?
Yeah. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Sounds good.
Looks like we got a couple
Yeah.
students still.
Yeah.
Hi, Rashaya.
Questions?
Hi, Noah.
I had a quick question for you if you got a minute. Because I probably didn't plan well, but I'm stupid and probably going to try it anyway. So we talked about like finishing all of the courses before taking the MCAT. How would you suggest if I'm going to be kind of in the middle of my last few when I wanted to take the MCAT? Is that doable, or am I setting myself up for failure? I think, Lauren, I think you and I talked about this when we met at the beginning of the year. I can't remember, but
Which classes
think
are
we
you
did.
missing?
biochem, physics 2, and then I think I'll be finishing up ecol. But I'll have the first introductory bio all done.
And you'll finish those courses by spring?
Yeah.
And so you're planning to apply for 2023?
Yes.
So you could take the MCAT in May or June, and it's still not a bad time, but you really want to do it after you've completed the courses.
Okay.
And you're still not late because the application doesn't even come out till May 3rd. At least that was this year. And you couldn't even hit the submit button until May 27th. So
Okay.
you'll complete the courses, but what you want to do is probably start to review, take some of the practice, find where your areas that you need to study. And that way, maybe you can also buy study guides along at the AAMC with the areas that you're in class with. So you can study along with the AAMC materials, knowing what areas that they're going to cover, and then shoot to take it May or June. And
Okay.
then, you can still submit your application even before you take the MCAT. Because like as Ethan mentioned, you'll take, several mock MCATs full length. You'll get an idea, a real good, accurate idea of how you're going to score. So if you're scoring within the range that you want to, and let's say you don't take it until the end of June, you can still submit your MCAS application early June, knowing that your MCAT scores are going to come in, and they'll come in both at the same time. So you'll be evaluated based upon all your materials submitted. So you should be fine.
Okay.